Hey, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And really nice to have you all again, once again, in this amazing webinar. So, this is Setu, and I'm the co founder and CTO at Risk Profiler. Today, we are going to have a amazing webinar discussion about protecting SDLC from all kind of external threats. So, for that, we do have our guest, Vandana. Hey, hi, Vandana. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Zitu. I'm really glad to be part of the show, and I'm looking forward to speaking with the audience.
Nice, nice, nice. And I think, Vandana, there is an interesting fact. As of today, it's been 10 years since we have met. So it was in 2015 when I graduated and then joined the first organization, and then I have seen you, and then I have met you. It's 2025 around the same time. So it's 10 years of knowing each other.
That's right. Before we met in the community, we met in one of the workplace where we were working in different locations.
Yes,
That's
yes,
right.
yes, yes, yes. Perfect. So with that, right, we are going to have an amazing discussion about how external threat intelligence can be used to go ahead and mature a lot of security posture kind of things in the software development lifecycle. With that, the first question that I have is basically how do dark web leaks or the phishing attacks or the vendor risks will affect the software development lifecycle security?
Okay, now, especially when it comes to dark web, as I mentioned, I am not going to say anything because that's one topic which is way, way, way far beyond my expertise. So I'm not going to say anything on that. Now, when it comes to phishing or vendor risks, I can share my perspective. So, phishing is something which can target employees, whether they are involved at any given stage of SDLC, because SDLC actually has multiple stages. So, we cannot say just one person will be involved who is part of the operations or a developer. So, it can range from developers to testers to operational staff, uh, and even the security professionals. So these phishing emails can trick anyone revealing the information, or it can actually trick them to reveal their credentials, download malwares, or we have seen cases where people have actually shared PII information which should not have gone. But successful phishing attempts can lead to even installation of backdoors, which can actually give hackers or attackers ongoing access to the development environments, which we do not want at any time. And I have seen a lot of cases recently also where there was a backdoor which was in actually added to one of the dependency, or a project in Go, which actually went unnoticed for 3 years. That was very scary. Even though the maintainers realized there's something which is fishy with that particular project, they actually removed it, but it was cached by then on the proxy. So these things are very scary. Now, when it comes to third party components, or what we call it as tools or vendors, we see a lot of breaches happening with these vendors, and they impacting our ecosystem. Like, for example, there was an issue with Apache which led to Equifax breach. Now, was only Equifax using that whole plugin that time, or that particular dependency, or that particular project? No, there were many other organizations they were using it. Similarly with Log4Shell or Log4j, what people were calling, there were multiple organizations from all the Fortune 500 companies to government agencies. Everyone was trying to figure out whether we are impacted or not. So when it comes to these third party dependencies, these vendor components, anyone can be actually impacted by that. And it can compromise the integrity of this whole software which is being used. Now, when we talk about these vendor risks, supply chain actually plays a very big role, because once you develop a software and there is a problem in that particular software, and that's shipped to everyone or all
Right.
your clients, which means they're also impacted from the get go itself. So you'll have to be very, very careful in what you use. And that's why I think people have started to talk about S bombs' importance, that why they are very, very important.
Yes. Yep, yep. Totally amazing. Yeah, I mean, a lot of insights. So I'll just cover quickly the couple of more points in terms of the dark web sort of things. So there's a fact that based on the recent research, there are approximately somewhere around 24 billion stolen username and passwords in the dark web, and that includes the Stealer logs as well. And these Stealer logs can also have the information around the OAuth tokens and all these things. And these kind of OAuth tokens will directly give access to internal SDLC tools like Okta, Jira, GitHub, AWS, whatnot. So with these type of information, attackers don't have to be like hardcore hackers kind of things, hardcore application security engineers. All they have to do is they have to go to the dark web, search for some compromised credentials, and then just plug and play, and they get lucky with a couple of credentials. And if that is, as you mentioned, if that is the credential of an open source project maintainer, Hail Mary. So it depends on how many stars, how many pulls it has, and that's where the supply chain begins. So totally agreeing with all the things that you have mentioned, Vandana. And then with that, right, I have a follow-up question on that. So now we have understood, like, okay, all these external threats are very dangerous when it comes to SDLC security, and it directly impacts it. So I want to understand, like, from your perspective, how can organizations use something around vulnerability intelligence to make sure they can always use this vulnerability intelligence to improve their organization's software development lifecycle or applications?
See, when it comes to threat intelligence, what I've seen with organizations is that people think about threat intelligence to be used only in the network security area, whether it's for SIM solutions or for threat hunting. I think that's the only area that people think about it. But it's actually much more bigger than that. There
Yes.
are teams who are actually focusing on monitoring, evaluating, and actually integrating security into the SDLC. If those people also are fed with the information, like what kind of attacks that can happen on our applications, that can be a big thing. Another important thing is that we need to have the right kind of a skill set to analyze threat intelligence and CVEs within the teams. We wouldn't say that, oh, now this is my SDLC. I will go step by step in this, or I've set up my SDLC and I'll only be working on this. No, that's not the case anymore. We have attacks happening from everywhere, whether it's on networks, whether it's on applications, whether it's on our internet facing servers, on OT devices, or anything that we have in our ecosystem, whether if for that matter it could be APIs.
Mm.
Everyone, if you are part of the radar, you're being attacked from everywhere. And as everyone says that no one is 100% secure on the internet. So what we need to do is we need to have a comprehensive or a platform where people can actually look into these threat intelligence reports or security advisories or CVE databases, because it caters to everyone. Now right now I'm part of the product security team, and I should know that okay, there is an advisory for a particular a product that is there which I am using. So I need to know about it, that how much impact it is actually giving on my product. So we need to have those kind of databases, and on top of it, we need to have some automation tools which streamline the collection and processing of the threat data.
Yeah.
So very important, and these tools can actually help in correlating the different points that we have and relevant threats which are apt for our ecosystem. So we can actually, my favorite thing is to have as much as automation possible in the ecosystem, whether it's for vulnerabilities, whether it's for security patches, or finding or updating CVE in the databases. So very much important. And let me tell you, when you're using your SDLC ecosystem, again, I will point out to the S bombs, because that's really my favorite part, where we need to know what we have in the ecosystem, then only we can fix it. Because
Yeah.
there's one research survey which was done, that how much is open source we are using these days. So 80 to 90% of the code on the internet is open source. Now, when
Yeah.
that's open source, which means we are using third party vendors in our ecosystem, and we need to know what we are using. Because if something is not working on our application or server, we go to the internet, download the dependency, and we start using it. Do we
Yeah.
document each and everything? Might be or might be not. So what we need is, we need a place where we know what we have, or you or use automation tools. There are so many open source as well.
Yeah.
So use them, and then create that database. After that, match it with the right kind of advisory which is there, so that we know that okay, there is a threat which is impacting our ecosystem, and this is the CVE which can be tricky for our organization.
Yep, 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 yep. And always right, Vandana. It's always sometimes it's not easy as well to build a continuous vulnerability intelligence pipeline kind of a thing. And my first job as a penetration testing kind of a guy, web application pen tester, and then a cloud security engineer. But from the day one, right, getting this intelligence feeds, combining to them together, enriching them, adding a lot of context, and then mapping those vulnerabilities to our organization's database that you have told how many SBOMs we have, how many assets we have. That's a huge effort. But good thing is a lot of open source amazing security tools are out right now, and all you have to do is plug and play kind of a things based on your organization needs. And the last most important thing is alerting. So I have seen organizations configuring alerts, routing these type of CVEs that are present in your application or in the container image that you have recently deployed to prod. But those vulnerabilities uh, can be belonging to just one small development team. However, I have seen those alerts being sent to a lot of to that entire development teams or a larger group. So that's a alert fatigue as well. So that kind of a role-based alerting will also help a lot. And the fun fact is, I think last year it was. I mean, we do ingest a lot of CVs, right? So we do the external threat intelligence, and the external threat intelligence made one of the most important thing is vulnerability intelligence. Last year alone, we have got whooping 40,000 new CVs in just 2024, and we were comparing that data with the previous year's data, and that's approximately 40% more compared to 2023. So, man, I think it's the at a given point, right? We were doing the correlation at scale, and it became Hail Mary. Okay, these are the CVEs, and these are the threat actors that are abusing the CVEs, and these are the campaigns. So, it's a huge correlation that we're doing. But the fun fact is, 40% up in just 1 year, and that's 40,000 CVEs in just 2024 is a huge thing, and it's I always feel like before I was wearing this security practitioner kind of a hat, and now I'm more of an software developer, sometimes security researcher, sometimes more of a CTO kind of an rookie CTO kind of a role and hat that I'm playing right now. One thing that I realized is it's not important how good you build your CV engine or vulnerability intelligence. It's also very important, as you have told, how good is your internal SBOM, internal assets inventory, because you have all this amazing CV vulnerability intelligence. What do you do with it? Okay, we know that these are the top 10 CV, but do we know that how many of my assets are being vulnerable for these top 10 highly targeted CVs? We don't have it until we have a proper SBOM and until we have a proper internet inventory. So then I realized like, okay, you need to have a solid inventory, internet inventory or external attack surface inventory, and then you need to make sure you have your solid vulnerability intelligence library, and only then the correlation can happen. If that correlation is not there, even this part is missing or this part is missing, if that is not there, there's no value with the vulnerability intelligence as well. So that kind of a context, and I have also initially relied on CVSS score a lot, and then I realized, okay, CVSS score is fine. There are 100 vulnerabilities with 9 point kind of an CVSS score. How many of those vulnerabilities are having exploits? How many of those vulnerabilities are part of the KEV database? How many of those vulnerabilities are actively being exploited by the hackers in various threat campaigns? That's again a huge portion as well. Then we started doing correlation around that, and I mean, it's an amazing pipeline to build when it comes to vulnerability intelligence being mapped with threat intelligence and mainly your internal organization assets. And for me, more than internal organization assets, the ones which are external facing assets, those are most important, because if tomorrow if some hacker comes and tries to hack those hack my organization, the first thing that they will do is target the internet facing assets. So those are my crown jewels, and I always want to make sure all these crown jewels are properly documented, and all this intelligence is mapped to those proper inventory.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought a very good point about the crown jewels, because so there was one point where we were actually evaluating, not in my current company, but I've in one of my projects where I was working, and we were still trying to figure out that if the crown jewels have some issues when they're internet based, and a lot of times organizations, they say that these servers are crown jewels, and once the work is done, sometimes they untag it, but they do not remove it from the
Mhm.
internet. So
Mhm.
they're there and anyone can attack them. So it's very important to tag them correctly, or even when you're untagging, you need to decommission them properly, because we don't decommission them. And that's where we are giving anyone and everyone an open invite to come into our home and
Yeah.
just steal anything that they want.
Yep. Totally, totally. And following that, right? So we started talking a bit of applications and all these external facing assets, right? So segmenting it into a bit, diving deep a bit. According to you, Vandana, what strategies do you think best discover the internet facing APIs that automatically spin up due to some CI/CD automations or deployments that they have right now?
hmm See, when it comes to APIs or microservices, now as they're part of the whole CI/CD pipeline, and most of our organizations want to use microservices and APIs because they're the best way that we can actually leverage
Mm,
our different assets, and even these focus very much on the visibility and help in those governance and security strategies. My take would be is to we should have a proper service mesh like Istio, because this can help detecting services which are deployed, and
mm,
these provide a good infrastructure layer which can help services end to end, and they can be very good in communication. Like
yeah,
I've used Istio in the past, and it serves really good. But see, this is my take on it. I'm sure there are people who have different experience, so I'm sure they could say it, or share their experiences. But I think
yeah.
that's one way to do it. And then we can use API gateways. It could be Kong, or it can be any other that we have, so that we can so that this can act as a single entry point for all the APIs, and can register all the new APIs which become active. Because if you don't know what APIs you have, I think you wouldn't be able to track it, because sometimes there are tons of APIs that we have for different purpose, and we forget that okay, this API also exists even if the purpose is done.
Yeah,
So very important that we track them. And also at the same time, the if an API is used for a certain purpose, it should not be used for any other purpose.
yeah,
That work should be done. Even
yeah.
I have seen organization using just in time access using APIs. I think that's one of the beautiful uh,
Mhm.
thing that we can implement, because you just implement it, and once your work is done, just be done with it. You don't
Yeah,
need that anymore.
yeah,
So when we have deployed these services, we need to maintain the configurations as well. So configuration has to be registered properly, that what purpose this API is being used for. Because now it's being used to it's being exposed to the internet, so we need to have the understanding that what are the configurations that are there, or what are the interdependencies these APIs have.
yeah,
Because if we don't understand the interdependencies, we would be messing up. Like
yeah,
there used to be multiple uh, dependencies in code, and you
yeah.
don't know what dependency, if we make a change in that, could lead to a critical vulnerability. Like this has
Mm,
happened with me in the past, wherein the best part was that I was very communicative with the development team. So once we made a change in um, one of the dependency, and after that there was another dependency because of which there was a critical vulnerability which became active, or which became part of the whole code. And development team said that, oh, we felt there's something wrong with it, and we realized yes, this impacted our code. So see, development team knew about it, that this something which major has happened, because they knew the ecosystem very well. So it is very important to work very closely with your teams who's actually managing the infrastructure or these APIs, which are internet facing, or even for that matter internal.
Yep, yep. And we do have one strategy from Sachin as well. Like, get your infrastructure as a code, either Terraform template or a CloudFormation template that you use for your API deployment. Feed it to an LLM and ask the LLM to find all the APIs. So it looks like that's another approach that one of our audiences is suggesting. So yeah, cool,
Okay,
cool, cool.
so when it comes to LLM, I have a very biased opinion because I've been playing around with it, and I've been reading all those discussions, and I've been reading all those LLM top tens, and we have also published LLM ASVS. Now,
Yeah,
one thing is that when we talk about LLM, if we do not train it right, because when you say you're feeding it right, if we don't feed it right, it can be poisoned. Like if you're adding poison to a cake, even though it's sweet, it'll still be poison,
uh,
right? So we have to have it in such a way that if we are feeding some information to our internal ecosystem, it
yeah,
gives us the right information. So the training has to be done right. Or it can actually it's not just about prompting those things, or it's not about just a simple supply chain attack. It could lead to buffer overflow to whatnot. So I think when we talk about LLMs for our IACs or APIs, it's not easy. It has to be implemented right. The model has to be used correctly and deployed and then trained right. Let's put it this, because there are multiple models which are there on the internet, and
yeah,
even the older models I've seen, they have flaws, right? We all know whether anything you take up from the LLM models. The older versions had issues, they've been refined, and now those issues have been fixed in the latest models, and everyone is learning. So LLM
yeah,
is pretty new. At least for me, I feel that it's still very new stage for me. All these llama models, or when you talk about open AI models, I'm still learning, getting through it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I mean, double-edged sword. So there are amazing benefits. At the same time, there are dangerous catastrophes that I mean that are waiting out there. And from my perspective, right, if you ask me, how will you go ahead and identify these APIs that are exposed to the internet, especially the CI/CD ones, automatically deployed ones? Uh, the fun fact is, in the year 2023, we were doing external attack surface management, right? So most of the external type of assets that we have is either subdomains or majorly domains, subdomains, and IPs. So these are the major ones. But the trends that we are also seeing is APIs. In 2024, we were able to identify so many shadow APIs, Vandana, and those shadow APIs do not have authentication or authorization on them. So that's a direct access to their environment where the organization's data is sitting on a hot plate for you. So I think we need to make sure we have solid mechanisms to identify the shadow APIs. Basically, shadow APIs are the APIs that are internet facing, and they are live, they are accessible, they're functional, but the security team is not aware of them. So those are the shadow APIs. So identifying these things is a pain. And Vandana, you have mentioned the API gateway, right? That's an amazing thing. And recently, I have seen also a few organizations doing deploying some kind of an VPC traffic mirroring or else gateway mirroring kind of a thing to identify the API endpoints from the network traffic. So what happens is the developers always amazing at documentation. They are always amazing at missing the APIs, missing mentioning about some APIs in the documentation. So those are the shadow. Even like AWS has a lot of shadow APIs. Azure had so many shadow APIs that a couple of, Wiz and those type of organizations, security researchers team abused, and then they identified vulnerabilities and they wrote amazing research papers. So making sure you identify your organization's APIs is very important. And other easy way is you can use CSPMs. The CSPMs or CNAPs, they will tell you that okay, based on the recently deployed, these are the API gateways that were updated with the new API endpoints. The next thing is we also have information from the outside in. If there is a very good external attack surface management, that does continuous monitoring of especially your attack surface with all the subdomains and things. All this tool has to do is monitor the transparency logs, certificate transparency logs, and then filter out the ones. If there are any new endpoints or new subdomains that come out for a given organization external facing, send out an alert. And then the security team can always go ahead and add it to their inventory. And from then they can always do the next steps kind of a thing. And I have also seen some organizations going ahead and doing vulnerability scans into the CI/CD. So, for example, in the CI/CD, they go ahead and there are some open source tools they can use to identify what are the, just like one of, I think Sachin has mentioned earlier, right? Give that IAC to the LLM and let LLM find what are the API endpoints. In the same way, there are some like we have Chekovis and these type of open source IAC scanners that can easily tell, okay, based on the deployment, there you are going ahead and creating a public S3 bucket. You're going ahead and opening up an egress port in an load balancer. So those type of scanners will also help us a lot in making sure these internet-facing APIs or microservices can be drastically reduced or contained at least. Perfect.
Right.
So, I mean, let's get into the, I mean, you're talking about the developer strategy, right, Vandana?
Right.
And always amazing at advocating developers in terms of strategies and what are the best practices, that kind of things. So, what are, I mean, according to you, what ensures that vulnerability intelligence reaches the right stakeholders in time?
Mhm. I think if we have a centralized system where we
Mhm.
can see everything, like I'm just trying to say that, let's say, ASPM. Now, organizations are talking about ASPM, which is Application Security Posture Management or Cloud Security Posture Management, where we are trying to see the posture of the whole application ecosystem, correct? Whether it's from SCA, or whether we have from SAST, whether we have from DAST, and maybe anything else could be threat intelligence, right? Similarly, we have feed-in coming from the vulnerability database as well. So
Mhm.
probably, if we, I'm just giving a my purview on that. That if we actually gather the threat intelligence in that as well,
Mhm.
which can combine with the assets that we have, whether it's the server IP, whether it's the application, I think that can be really interesting for leadership to see the numbers,
Yeah,
and at the same time for developers and security people or testers to see the kind of vulnerabilities that are there, so that
yeah,
everyone would be able to see everything on one dashboard. Because for stakeholders, I think they want to see the numbers, but at the same time, how are we acting on it, or how are we fixing them in the real time? So it's very important. And that ecosystem should be notifying the relevant stakeholders if a new vulnerability is detected, if it's in that their area. Let's say
yeah,
if I'm managing Linux servers, or a particular application, so I'm talking from both the points, I should be notified for my vulnerabilities, not everything. I don't
yeah,
need to know everything. So there
yeah,
has to be specific notification that should be done. Because I remember doing the network scanning as well at one point of time, and uh, there was mix and match of issues.
yeah,
So I don't think so I need everything. It's
yeah,
going to be so clumsy, and I feel that security is just keeping me stuck.
yeah,
i i,
spamming us
I don't want to do that. Yes. So we
totally.
need to have proper roles and responsibilities defined for,
Mhm.
if let's say there's an issue that comes in, who'd be handling those issues, who'd be handling the vulnerabilities. So if
Yeah,
there are 10 developers, they should not be handling the all 10 should not come into the picture. One
yeah,
should be the point of contact, and then cascading the information to the rest of the other people, because that
yeah,
clarity has to be there. Because if that clarity is not there, it'll all be jumbled up, and that ownership will fail. And most of it is that things would not work out. That's where we talk about security champions program, that we need to have a champion in the team who can help out, and not just a security champion, but a champion who can advocate about such issues. So very very important. And then uh, if there is an issue that comes in, that's been shared with the stakeholders, and that has not been fixed on time, it is as good as not sharing with the stakeholders. Like, we do
Exactly.
the pen test, right? We do the pen test and say that, okay, these are the findings that are there.
Yeah,
Now, findings are there. What are we doing with the findings? That's important. If we
yeah,
are taking risk exception, if we are fixing them, if we are parking it for the later,
yeah,
we need to know it. If we are parking it for the later and forgetting about it, then it's as good as not doing anything. And then if people say that, oh, it's a critical vulnerability, but I cannot fix it right now, so I'm going to take exception and then forget about it, again, there's
yeah,
no, it's of no use. So that's when a major portion comes in, wherein there's a collaboration work comes in, there's a cross functional team learning comes in. Like I was speaking about, that I could not detect the security flaw, but the team that I was working with, development team, actually they spotted that there is a security issue. So do you want to take a look at it? It's just, we feel that there is a security issue, but if you can tell us, if you can figure out those vulnerability, or if you can test it out, that'll be really great. And we work together and we figure out, yes, it's a critical vulnerability. Let's work on the fix for this one.
yep, yep. Totally, totally on the point. And from my experience, right, Vandana, I have
Mhm.
seen organizations either they fall into this enterprise kind of an organization, or they are like a product based kind of an organization, at least in my experience, with the experience that I have. So, in the product based organizations where I was working as a security architect, the amazing thing that will work is chat ops. So earlier we did discuss about this building amazing vulnerability intelligence pipeline, right? Having all the feeds with the context enrichment about threat actors, threat campaigns, IOCs, and all that stuff. So the product-based companies, they love to have chat ops. So what they have is, like, they have Slack channels. So they have Slack channels, and we need to make sure we create direct ones, which are basically sending the vulnerabilities of that team only to the team, not everything to them. And I also strongly feel that the value of vulnerability intelligence is totally lost if the people who can fix the issue, they don't see this in time. And to make sure they see it in time, the only thing that can be done is automation. Without automation, it's dead, because you won't get constant things, right? On the other side, the thing that I've seen that was working for this vulnerability intelligence in the enterprise organizations is this amazing ticketing systems. So they have proper sprint plans, and all these they won't do anything which is not part of the sprint, that kind of an organization, right? So for them, it's always the ticketing system and the security champion that you have told, they'll be aware of it, then they'll talk to the scrum master and they'll add it to the current sprint, then make sure they'll prioritize it, fix it. So personally, making sure the developers get real-time alerts in their respective communication channels. We need to make sure we meet the developers where they work. We can't expect, like, okay, this is the cybersecurity team, and the cybersecurity team posts all the alerts in our channel. Please come to our channel, subscribe to our channel, find the vulnerabilities, and fix the vulnerabilities that are in your environment. That's not going to work. At least I have learned it by burning my fingers. So I was building a centralized vendor vulnerability management kind of a dashboard that never worked in one of the organization. And later I started putting that vulnerability centralized dashboard and mapping all those tickets to the Scrum tickets in the respective teams. Then it worked, because if we go to the place where developers work, it works out of the box. If we expect them to come to our place and work, it's Hail Mary. So I think that's a couple of things. And the last thing that will always boost up is the KPIs, Vandana. So the KPIs like mean time to remediation. So we started putting a competition kind of a thing. So there is actual team, there is another team, there are like multiple teams. So the mean time to remediation for the critical vulnerabilities for team A is just 2 days, and the team B is 10 days. So the developers personally, I mean, if I am a developer, I don't care. Okay, fine, I'll go ahead. But the executives of that development team, they'll feel a bit sometimes embarrassed, and they'll start prioritizing it. So I've seen that kind of a competitive public KPIs and dashboards of the vulnerabilities and mean time to remediation, those type of metrics, helping a lot. So I mean, these are a couple of things that I felt like, okay, worth sharing here.
I totally agree with you that it's very important to have these kind of hackathons and understand what's happening. Let me tell you what we've done in the past is that we actually did hackathons to promote each other. For example, uh, my team would be actually finding issues in the other team, they'll be finding issues in the third team, and then we are coming up with a dashboard. Okay, there are issues that exist. So before anyone else finds out, we are going to find issues in our code. So those kind of hackathons actually really helped and motivated teams to work hard and build something which is different and new.
Yeah, yeah. I just wish those guys don't end up fighting at the end of the day because
Oh
you
no.
found 10 vulnerabilities in my repo. How dare you?
Oh no. I think that was a fun thing where they were being rewarded for finding the issues. Now, any which ways, we are actually rewarding the people who find it externally. So how about we rewarding the teams internally itself?
Interesting. Nice, 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 nice. I mean, in future, if I wear that security practitioner kind of a hat, trying to go, I mean, trying to experiment this for sure. Nice, 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 nice. So yeah, I mean, we did speak about API security, and then we did speak about how to make sure we help the developers not to uh, ignore the vulnerabilities with the real-time vulnerability intelligence. But in terms of the first step, right, in the design phase, okay,
Mhm.
what do you think these are the top couple of design considerations that can
Mhm.
be implemented for, especially for the publicly facing APIs on the.
See, I will give my answer to that, but see, there is an OWASP API top 10. That's one amazing project that you should definitely check it out. I'm going to put it in the chat as well, because that project actually highlights the top 10 risks which are there as part of the APIs, because it's very important to know
Yeah,
about them. And the latest version was released in 2023. So it's not that old, because it's generally, I've seen that these things are updated every 3 to 4 years. So if it's 23, I think that's a really pretty recent one. So you should definitely check that out. And if I have to give a generic answer, then let's start with authentication and authorization. Very, very important,
yeah,
especially with API keys, because we need to verify the users and the services that those APIs are trying to attempt to access. Because if we don't authorize them, then anyone would be able to play around with them, so which we do not want. At the same time, um, encryption is the key. So what
yeah,
kind of encryption we are using, how are we storing the data, are we rate limiting, because anyone can abuse APIs if we are not rate limiting, because
yeah,
we don't want our assets to be flooded. So
yeah,
to mitigate this denial of service attacks, we need to make sure or ensure that we are actually rate limiting our APIs and it's available when it's needed. Because if it's not available when we need it, it is as good as not having the right kind of infrastructure or ecosystem for it. So while we say CIA tried, now it's not CIA tried anymore. We have CIAA or AAP. There are multiple things that people have added to it. So
yeah,
very, very important to have a proper ecosystem for it. And then as I said, API gateways, very important to manage the API traffic.
yeah,
Because if we don't have the caching enabled, rate limiting enabled, or IP whitelisting or blacklisting enabled, we are in a big, big trouble. We can never do that. And another thing that I always say, whether it's apps, whether it's LLM, whether it's anything, input validation and sanitization. If
yeah,
you do not validate your inputs, you will always see these issues. SQL injection was there back then in 1980s. It's still there. And when we
yes,
talk about injection, it actually came down to levels. I think it came down from number one to the lower
yeah,
charts of a web top 10, and then again now it's coming back. It's jumping back again. Now,
yeah,
why? Because we're still facing these issues. We are using the newer ecosystem databases, or even for that matter, languages. But what we miss out on the basic hygiene of validation. And it's not that people are not following; people are following, but then attackers are trying to find innovative ways to bypass that. So
yeah,
I think we need to have the right kind of schema validation in place so that Nobody is affecting our ecosystem in that. And then, oh, I think I'm using ecosystem a lot these days. So we need to maintain proper logs. I think once you're hit with an issue, if you have everything set up in logs, you can monitor it. So I think logging is very, very important. Sometimes we actually undermine our logging team, or the team who's monitoring it, but they are very, very important, because sometimes the case is done, and we need to understand what went wrong. So to
Yeah,
do the root cause analysis, we need to have those kind of logs. So I think for how long you're going to keep, that's another story, whether it's for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe based on the compliance, you can keep it. But I
mhm,
think 1 year, you should do it for sure.
yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I think the same thing I have in mind as well. So the first thing is secure design principles. So all
Yes.
the API top 10 that we have in OWASP, implement them. Okay, and that includes authentication, authorization, WAF, caching, rate limiting, all the injection attacks prevention. So all that stuff, amazing. And the next thing is, uh, try not to expose it without any authentication or authorization in the first place, but also have a continuous monitoring kind of a solution, both internally and externally. So internally, you can use some kind of CSPM or CNAP kind of solutions these days. They can easily identify the API endpoints that are not having JWT kind of an
Hmm.
authentication settings. So that's one thing. From an external perspective, you can also make sure you identify. You can use an excellent access surface management tool to tell, okay, these are my organization's subdomains, and one of the subdomain is having API endpoints in it, and now anymore it's not authorization. It's not asking for any authorization or authentication. So these are a couple of strategies that we can play with. And most importantly, I have seen organizations uh, outdated credentials being exposed in the dark web and deep web, being used to access these publicly accessible APIs. So have a good threat intelligence solution that provides you the identity intelligence side of things. And whenever there is a new stealer log that comes out in dark web that belongs to your organization's domain, you can always go ahead and use any kind of I mean, they have amazing integration. All the Okta, Auto, even Cognito have all these amazing integrations where you can just reset the password or temporarily lock the account out, and then add that password to your Active Directory blacklisted password list. So these are some strategies that I think are very important to follow, especially when you have these APIs, which are the keys to your organization's data being exposed to the internet. Cool, cool, cool. So, Vandana, we did speak about a lot of security practices and advisories, all this stuff. And you also touch based a bit in terms of logging and monitoring in the previous response that you have provided. So, can you tell me like why real-time external threat monitoring is crucial? Is for the cloud security, posture management, or cloud security side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to real life or real time threat monitoring, um, the important thing to notice is that we are preventing potential breaches, or we are actually trying to minimize the damage. Like we can say, I remember when I was working on IDS and IPS, people
Mm,
used to say that IDS is like, it's like a post-mortem where the person is dead and you're trying to figure out where the problem was, what went wrong.
okay.
Now, IPS is like, or real time monitoring is like where you're blocking it, and
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out is an active police which finds out there is something which is happening, and we have to stop it right then and there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
actually, real time monitoring helps in understanding that,
Yeah.
where we are detecting unusual behavior or unauthorized access attempt, and
Yeah.
we are saying that, okay, there are vulnerabilities in our environment, but we are not letting anyone exploit those vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
For example, if let's say there was a supply chain, so I'm going back to supply chain attack, because that was with one of the software which was shipped to everyone with Orion, SolarWinds attack, where think of a situation where you're using a software
Yeah.
and that's being shipped to everyone. Now you're being exploited. Now you know there is a vulnerability and you stop it then and there. You stop
Yeah.
using that software, or you stop using that dependency, or you stop that server for that matter, or you
Mm.
isolate that server or block the service. Because
Yeah.
of real time monitoring, got to know that, okay, there is a problem and you
Yeah.
need to work on that. And
Yeah.
when it comes to cloud environments, they're pretty dynamic because we are creating resources, we are
Mm.
modifying it, we are dynamically deleting them as well. And especially with IAC, I think somebody pointed out on IAC, which is infrastructure as a code. We
Yeah.
are deploying the whole environment using IAC. So it's very important to continuous monitor it, that with these IAC also we can introduce the vulnerabilities,
Yes.
because IACs are spinning the whole infrastructure, and there is a small flaw we left or we forgot about, that misconfiguration which was there.
Yeah.
Now that has spun up the whole ecosystem, and there is a problem there. What will you do about it if you don't monitor it in the real time? Anybody can come in and steal the information. So
Yeah.
these real time threat monitorings can actually be integrated into this whole processes that we have. We can actually apply those security controls in on it, and not just because we need it as part of security controls, but it's part of our regulatory compliance as well.
Yeah.
Now, talk about GDPR. If we lose our information pertaining to the people in Europe, what will you do about it? EU region, you're gone. You have to pay hefty amount of money, and then or you have to pay the fines. Then talk about HIPAA. Talk about PACI. So they need immediate notification of security incidents.
Yeah.
How would you do? And then if you don't have the visibility in your cloud, because now we have multiple public and private clouds, we're dealing with a lot of SaaS vendors. So this real-time monitoring actually provides a centralized view of all our cloud assets that is there. And especially we were talking about CNAP and cloud security posture management. So it actually gives us the whole picture of our assets, and what we have in the whole um, uh, cloud environment that we have, or cloud infrastructure that we have. So we need to understand, and then not just to know about our real time incidents or events, but we also need to know what the landscape, the threat landscape we are building up.
Yeah.
As we talk about cyber threats, they are becoming more sophisticated. As much as we are spending on our security team, the attackers are spending more time on it. They are being more creative. So it's
Yeah.
the time to detect and respond to all these threats,
Yeah.
and we can't do it if we don't monitor it,
Yeah.
because now we have so many zero-day exploits coming in, and the day exploit comes in, you would see it on exploit DB.
Yeah.
Earlier we used to say, oh, it's going to come within this week, or it might come tomorrow, but now it's the very same day exploits are coming. How would you deal with it?
Yeah.
So we have to work on it. And if you talk about denial of service attack, right? If
Yeah.
you do not know how exactly your environment is working, you would not be able to optimize it, and then you will be prone to denial of service attacks for sure. So real time threat monitoring is very very crucial, and I think CSPM tools are really really important in helping that out.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect. I mean, covered pretty much covered 80% of all the points. And, so let me just cover the remaining 20% that I could recall. So, from at least from my perspective, cloud is very dynamic here. So, cloud is very dynamic, and it's very easy to go ahead and spin up resources. Very easy to destroy the resources. And sometimes, if you have bad jobs, kind of in situation, the resources come up, they get the job, and then they die. Ephemeral resources. So what is happening here is the real-time external threat monitoring part is easy to say but very difficult to do. That's the reality of how the thing is how it is right now. So when this simple instance, for example, EC2 server is coming up to do a bad job, and it will die in like 15-20 minutes. So as a security practitioner, I would always think that yeah, it will come up in 15-20 minutes. It will die in. It will die soon. Which attacker is gonna come and compromise the organization is like my perspective. And then comes the amazing attacker, and the attackers are so good because we do a lot of threat intelligence, right? So we deploy a lot of honeypots. We do a lot of deploy a lot of sensors in like 16 different regions, and then we monitor this how quickly we can see the thing coming up. So just to make a wild guess, Vandana, if you are spinning up an EC2 server and putting an port F22, SSH port or 21 open to the internet, how much time do you think it will take for the attacker to come and start performing brute force attack on that SSH server? Just a wild guess.
Maybe a minute.
Exactly, less than a minute. So in less than a minute, we have seeing. I mean, we were wondering like we had the honeypots and we had the sensors. The sensor logs will be coming in. It just went up in the next couple of minutes. I mean, less than 30 seconds or 40 seconds. We see the logs coming in for the SSH brute force kind of things. So the hackers are that quick because the AWS public IP range, GCP public IP range, Azure public IP range, all these public IP ranges are known to everyone. So to be more precise, they even know what's the compute's public IP range. I mean, forget about all the cloud front. I mean, because Amazon has a lot of public IP spaces, but they accurately know which IP range belongs to compute. Because for the good reasons, Amazon publishes it, and amazingly, the hackers use it that information that is published by AWS to start scanning it on a continuous basis. With this kind of an attackers being out there, I don't want any of my bad jobs, even simple crawl jobs or anything like that coming up, and I don't want them to be open to the internet at all. So, and that is the reason why the continuous monitoring or real-time monitoring is important. If hackers are going ahead and finding an external-facing, internet-facing cloud resource that belongs to your organization in less than 1 minute, how should the security practitioners or security defenders I mean, how what should be our threshold? We should be like identifying them in less than 30 seconds. That should be our goal. So with that kind of a thing, we started building the attack surface management module with continuous scanning, but it's very hard. It's sometimes very compute intensive. You need to keep on scanning it. For hackers, they're amazing, yeah. All the bots and command and control servers that they deploy are the servers that are rooted for random vulnerabilities. So they don't have to spend a penny on the compute, and they'll use someone's infrastructure to do all the internet-wide scans, and they find the vulnerabilities. And always, if any successful FTP credentials worked, they get the passwords in a different command and control server. All they have to do is use some random rooted server or vulnerable servers on the internet, use them to scan this IP range, find the vulnerabilities. And for the security practitioners, we need to make sure we maintain that infrastructure to continuously scan on a less than 30 seconds kind of an mean detection rate. So that is honestly not at all easy. And what I believe is if you want to get external threat monitoring for the cloud resources or cloud security posture management, the most important thing is speed. And you need to make sure you don't just blindly believe on cloud security posture management. You need to always have the feedback loop. So the cloud security posture management will go ahead and check these are the 100 resources, these are the 100,000 misconfigurations that you have. Go ahead and fix it. But if you have that kind of a feedback loop that you get from an external attack surface management that does continuous monitoring, you get now, okay, now I have fixed it. Tomorrow, it again, I get an alert from an ESM tool telling that it is public. So I get that feedback loop always with the developers. It help a lot. So these are a couple of things that I always keep in mind when it comes to uh, doing external threat monitoring for my cloud environments.
Yeah, I think we should actually open it up for audience also,
Yeah.
because we are almost at the top of the hour, and if anyone has any questions, because we see a lot of good insights from the audience, like we really like what Sachin was sharing, because I
Yeah.
think it should be two-way street where you and I can chat for hours like we have done it in the past, and people or the audience sharing insights is again very very important. we
Yes.
we
Let's
we know this much, and then audience know this much, so it adds up to this one.
Yes, totally, totally. Let's wait for some audience comments.
Yeah.
and we're happy to discuss them. So, guys, if you are watching the webinar and if you have any suggestions, feedback, just shoot them out. We'll be here for the next 5-10 minutes, and before we drop off.
Yeah, even we would love to not just take feedback or inputs, but we want to hear your stories as well. Because everyone has their own story about the attacks that are happening, the way they're working. Even developers I've seen, they have their own insights on it. So
Yeah.
I think the way attackers are being created, we need insights from everyone, which is who's being part of it.
Yep. 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 Yep.
See, if you don't ask questions, we can keep chatting. We can go on. Yeah. I think, Setu, why don't you share some resources which actually people can look at when it comes to cloud security posture management or threat intelligence? Because see, dark web is not something which is my area, but this is something which is part of your area. So how about you sharing some insights on it?
Yeah. 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 Definitely. So it's from what perspective, right? In terms of resources, I'll just put it definitely at the end of this session. And we also have a lot of participants. For all of them, we'll be sharing the resources as well. And every time we have a webinar, a blog post will come out with a ton of resources. So stay tuned for that. But I just want to quickly touch base on this external threat intelligence, Vandana, on the dark web side of things, and how this enriches. So if there is a new CV that came out, and if there is a lot of hacker chatter happening in the dark web on hacking forums, it's always it always gives you the perspective that okay, there's an exploit gonna come out for very soon for this. And when we talk about external threat intelligence, there are multiple things. So when I was a penetration tester, when I was a red team kind of a guy, what I used to do is I used to recon an organization in multiple ways. Okay, what are the IPs and subdomains that belongs to this organization? What are the third party vendors of this organization? And what are the breach credentials that are present in the dark web about this organization? And what are what are the vulnerabilities in their own internet attack surface? So with all this kind of information, what typically we do is we stitch that together and we find an attack path to compromise the organization. So, in the same way, when I talk about the external intelligence, initially it's only threat intelligence is more about threat actors, campaigns, and indicators of compromises. So these are the primary ones. But as the hackers are evolving, and we need to step up our game, so the external threat intelligence is more of vendor intelligence, attack surface intelligence, brand intelligence, first party intelligence, your own organization's emails compromised in the dark web, which is called as dark web intelligence. So all these type of things spins together to form something called as an external threat intelligence, which is having much way more context, and it helps in way faster remediation side of things as well. So with these many time, and it's huge. I mean, initially when I was starting, it's just a couple of you were just majorly focusing on first party, third party attack surface kind of things. But as we started talking to a lot of customers, getting a lot of customers feedback, we ended up having attack surface intelligence, brand intelligence, vendor breach intelligence, identity intelligence, dark web intelligence, cyber threat intelligence, physical security intelligence, vulnerability intelligence. So all these are combined now just to form this external intelligence. And the resources are just there are like multiple open source things. And I'm also speaking training, giving a training at the Seasides conference in the next couple of weeks exclusively on external threat intelligence side of things. So if there are any freshers, we have a lot of job openings, senior researchers, so you can always meet and greet. So planning to close at least 5 to 10 roles in the next couple of months. So super excited about them.
Superb.
Perfect. So first of all, Vandana, I want to just thank you for your time, and it's been amazing with all the insights and all the stuff that you're chatting about. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. And I'm glad to be part of the show. And I think we had really good conversation today.
Yes, yes, yes. And I would like to also thank all the audience, amazing audience who were part of this webinar and then watching us, listening to us. So thank you all for your time as well. See you next time. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.